welcome your MC, Lerato Mbele.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome you to the second Development Forum brought to you by the OPEC Fund. I want to start off by quoting a wise man who said that tomorrow belongs to those who plan for it. And I believe we are here today to plan for the future not known, yet to manifest. Between last year when we first met, right here in Vienna, and this year, many things have changed. Global inflation has affected the world over. We've seen prices of food, fuel, fertilizer, and grain stocks go up. And even though central banks have tried to intervene by raising interest rates, they find themselves between a rock and a hard place. If they raise the rates too high, it impacts the indebted consumer. If they don't do anything at all, it impacts the poorest among us. And so we've come to a point where somebody needs to mitigate between the state and its responsibilities and society and its expectations. And I think this is where development finance institutions come into play, because you can help to create the buffers that are needed. And this is why our theme this year is driving resilience and equity. Resilience so that states can do the right things, manage their budgets, build up their reserves, and make decisions that are impactful. And equity, somebody to speak for the ordinary men and women at the till point who can't speak for themselves. And so in your conversations here at this second forum, remember the underpinnings of resilience and equity. Put people front and center, please. As I close off, I'd like to remind us of an important quote from Neville Goddard, who was a poet from Barbados. And he said, a change in mindset, a change in feeling leads to a change in destiny. What makes the OPEC Development Forum really special is that here we are exploring new perspectives, fresh outlooks from the South. We are giving credence to the fact that solutions localized can come from the South. And we're promoting the idea of greater collaboration amongst leaders and countries of the South. And so as we talk development, driving resilience, and driving equity, let's remember that we can change our own mindsets as people of the South and change our destiny. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our host, Dr. Abdulhamid Alkhalifa, the Director General of the OPEC Fund.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to OPEC Fund Development Forum 2023. We are honored to host you and look forward to a day of lively discussion. After the success of last year's forum, the OPEC Fund decided to have this event annually, bringing leaders and practitioners to focus on the most relevant to the development finance. Today, we are convening global thought leaders, policymakers, private sector players at this critical point of time to consider solutions to the challenges faced by the development community. Most important is how to transform development finance to ensure we deliver sustainable and lasting impact into the future. The world is going through a difficult time, and I hope our gathering today will inspire hope and confidence in our joint capacity to deal with even the most difficult challenges. We must never forget that our strength lies in our ability to work together and to adapt to evolving needs. I look forward to hearing from you and wish you an enjoyable and successful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alkhalifa. As I introduce our next speaker, I'm just going to ask you to look up to the ceiling, look around you. Let's take in this beautiful place, the Garden Palais Liechtenstein, a historic site with a lot of institutional memory, beautiful gardens, and one of the largest private collections of art. And so as you network and meet today, please take in, savor the creativity and the beauty of this space. But it's also got me thinking that development finance is much like building a fortress. You've got so many layers. You've got those who come in at the foundational stage, those who come in at the mezzanine bridging stage, those who take on a lot of debt at the senior debt stage, and then all hands on deck. This idea of blended finance to get the right pricing on debt, bringing more and more people from the private sector. What's happening in the world today is a reconsideration of multilateralism. And as the world's markets change and shift and the South comes into its own, there is a call to really rethink and reform financial institutions and probably even the financial architecture. Somebody who's done a lot of work in this space is Frannie Leautier. She has also been the lead in a seminal report around the need to think of transformative and alternative models of financing. And she joins us this morning to share her thoughts. So please welcome warmly, Frannie Leautier.
Your Excellencies, good morning. Thank you very much, Lerato, for that kind introduction. I'm going to be very brief because today is a discussion point beyond our report, so I'm going to really summarize in brief, and my hope is that you've all read the report and therefore I don't have to go into much detail. If the multilateral development banks did not exist, given the challenges the world is facing today, we would have had to create them. So what I'm going to share with you is the result of work that was done under the G20 presidency of Italy, that was then taken over by Indonesia and now by India. So it has sustained 3 G20 presidencies. And the result of the work comes from a group of experts who were put together to think through what would be the new ways in which multilateral development banks can play a role to address the challenges the world is facing today. So we had a very excellent team. I was very lucky to work with really solid experts who had background in multilateral development banks that worked in the private sector. Some of them were researchers who had studied MDB issues for a long period of time. And we looked at the issues that the world is facing. If we are going to balance resilience and equity, where is the money going to come from? And the MDBs are the real opportunity channel to do that. So what did we conceive as opportunities for change? The first 2 recommendations we have to do with the shareholders of the MDBs, including many of you who are owners of these banks. And the first one was the risk tolerance that shareholders would have, to say that if these are the world's risks that we're facing, how should we redefine risk tolerance such that the MDBs can do more? And that was our first recommendation, which is to rethink the definition of risk in the MDBs to allow them to do more. And then the second one is to recognize something that is quite unique to MDBs, which is callable capital. When the MDBs were created, if you start with the Bretton Woods, it was just after the war, most of the countries were quite poor, and therefore they made a commitment to support the work that the MDBs would do for reconstruction. We face a similar challenge now, which is to call once again for the shareholders to make their collective commitment for the future financing that is needed for the MDBs. And so callable capital is that unique feature, and we have a recommendation around that. These two have a potential to raise the headroom substantially and can be accomplished mainly through, but not exclusively, actions at the level of the boards of the MDBs. They require shareholders to consider their own approaches to risk appetite, and they will be watched very closely by the markets, particularly the rating agencies, and hence have to be done deliberately and be supported by a very clear and coordinated communication strategy. The third recommendation we had was around innovation. And I'm very happy to say I have worked at the World Bank, I worked at the African Development Bank and at TDB, and I see here the leadership from those institutions. And when you look at what the African Development Bank has done already in hybrid capital, new forms of innovation, including before this report, like Room to Run and other such innovations, there's a huge opportunity to do more. And likewise, TDB, and I see the president of TDB here, looking at how to innovate by bringing in private sector financing using guarantees and insurance in a particularly unique way. And the OPEC fund has been at the forefront of supporting those kind of innovations. So this idea was to say, first of all, how do you free up more space on the balance sheet of the MDBs through risk transfers to the private sector, like Room to Run, donor guarantees, such as what was done recently by Canada and the UK and others in the case of the African Development Bank, but also the role that MIGA can play, because so far MIGA has been working only with the World Bank Group, and we thought that that could be a good opportunity for MIGA to do more. The Islamic Development Bank has used guarantees very effectively in the past, and therefore the innovation around guarantees was something we thought could be used more. Then we have another block of innovation, which is around new forms of capital. I already mentioned hybrid capital and using callable capital in a unique way. And then finally, especially given the situation we're in, boosting the counter-cyclical capacity of the MDBs, particularly through pooling commitments, like pooling callable capital commitments for crisis, or some of the new ideas in terms of using SDRs. The final two recommendations were mostly around the world that looks into the MDBs. So starting first with the rating agencies. The rating agencies and the enabling environment in which capital adequacy can be achieved need to be pursued quickly and without delay, and irrespective of the views of the G20 on any other recommendations. So I'm very happy to say that since our report came out, the rating agencies have all issued press releases to show how they would view the MDB reforms. And they've been quite open in terms of their views, and have argued that if the MDBs do this with full shareholder support and collectively, they will not be penalized or downgraded. And there's some areas to worry about, but they were quite forthright in coming up with those recommendations. And the final area then is more around data transparency and how information and innovation is done amongst the MDBs. So very quickly, just in terms of strategic considerations, we believe that capital adequacy reforms and innovations would be most effective if they're part of a structured program of MDB actions. We're very happy to see that after the spring and annual meetings of the World Bank has come up with its reform path. Likewise, the African Development Bank didn't actually wait for the annual meetings. They took the report and started to run with it. We've seen innovation from the Asian Development Bank. IDB Invest decided to completely redefine its risk appetite. And we've seen a lot of innovation from EBRD, which is also linking to what they can do with the private sector. But I'm happy to say one of the first banks that invited me to speak to their executive team after the report came out was Badea. And so I think, to me, when you look at how the regional MDBs can also do the reforms and move forward using the flexibility they have in governance, that is a great opportunity to be leveraged. I'll be very happy to hear how far Badea has gone and others in these reforms. And then shareholders have a critical role in MDB capital adequacy, and these reforms can reinforce one another when enacted as part of a coherent reform package. And I'm also happy to say, through leadership done by Remy Riou and his colleagues on Finance in Common, he has been able to show what's the impact when you work collectively at the DFI level. So I think we built a lot from those innovations. And then coordinated implementation and communication by a substantial number of MDBs would be beneficial to market perceptions. And then finally, if reforms increase lending capacity, then shareholders need to ensure adequate budgets and resources to support and sustain high-quality operations. We identified 3 areas for future work: risk appetite and capital adequacy framework, needing more granular analysis in order to do it right, capital and reverse stress testing, because we couldn't do enough of that during our time, but also on innovation to assess the impact of a variety of factors on the income dynamics, including the impact of credit ratings and innovations like risk transfers, hybrid capital, and non-voting share capital. So my hope is that in 2 days from now, when we go to the Paris summit, that all this momentum behind the MDB reforms carries over, and that we are able to make huge progress in Paris, because we need it, because the time is now, and if we don't do it, we'll face a much harder reform agenda going forward. I thank you very much for your attention and look forward to learning more today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Frannie Leautier, partner at SouthBridge Investments. And in a short while, there'll be a conversation where your report is evaluated a little bit more, and their responses to some of the questions you've presented to the heads of agencies. Right now, it gives me the greatest pleasure to introduce to you the 3rd democratically elected Prime Minister of Bhutan, a country that has been deliberate about harnessing growth and denting poverty. This is an example of when leaders do the right things with the right intentions. Please welcome warmly His Excellency Prime Minister Dr. Lotay Tshering.
Well, Excellencies, heads of representatives of different governments and organizations, OPEC fund team and organizers, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start, I have the highest honor to offer you the greetings of my King, His Majesty King Jigme, her Queen, people of Bhutan, what we all know as the land of gross national happiness. I'm very happy to be part of this gathering at the historic Palais Legislative and the beautiful city of Vienna. I thank the OPEC Fund Special Director, Dr. Alkhalifa, and his team for the warm invitation for making Bhutan part of this. This is very special and historic, I would say, not only because Bhutan is being added to almost 125 countries that you're already working with, but because of the new hope and meaningful journey we'll embark from here on. It is for this reason that I decide to take leave of absence from the ongoing parliament that is going on back home. With all the dedicated and well-meaning people that are gathered here, it is my honor, and I take this opportunity to share Bhutan's unique story. Bhutan's unique story, not just because I'm from Bhutan, but that would be a story that is shared by many of similar countries. Our monarchs have always insisted on a sustainable approach to development, keeping happiness and well-being of all Bhutanese people at the heart of it. We call it gross national happiness. It means development with values, a philosophy that considers economic progress as only one of the components of wholesome human growth. That is why our Constitution requires us to maintain intergenerational equity when it comes to usage of natural resources. And also, it mandates us to have at least 60% of the country under forest cover at all times to come. Right now, we have almost 72%. Within that, we have further legally protected areas as national parks and biological corridors. In fact, as we gather here, the parliament in Bhutan is discussing on adding one additional biological corridor called BC9, connecting two big national parks in the eastern part of the country. That takes our legally protected forest cover to almost 52%. It is thanks to our kings that Bhutan is today a carbon negative country, while other nations are trying to be carbon neutral by 2050. These same GNH values were our biggest strength during the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, which posed immense threat to a small country like ours. His Majesty the King relentlessly fought on the ground to secure the lives of the people at all cost. We delivered the best of vaccines at the most significant rate. We managed to kick off the historic first round of COVID-19 vaccinations to almost 95% of the population within a week. That was the story in early 2021. After achieving maximum herd immunity, we came out with least damages to lives. I offer my gratitude to all the partners for their unconditional support. Ladies and gentlemen, despite all the sacrifices and efforts, Bhutan remains ever more vulnerable to the adverse impacts of climate change. As we talk, we are experiencing very dry spells and swollen rivers in some parts of Bhutan, including flash floods and heavy rainfall in some other parts of Bhutan. By the way, we are talking about a very small country, and we are already starting to face this. Our vulnerabilities are aggravated by our unavoidable reliance on agriculture and hydropower. Both are climate sensitive. I always say that greenhouse gas do not require passports to cross geographical boundaries, and our carbon negativity and all the genuine efforts are futile if it is not in sync with the spirit and intentions of international community. Today's forum, themed on driving resilience and equity, is very pertinent. As a global member, we must work together to become more climate resilient and attain equity, acknowledging sacrifices and efforts of all developing countries. Like COVID-19, climate change impacts are felt disproportionately more by poorer countries. My dear friends, let me take this opportunity to share with you some of Bhutan's own modest attempt to build resilience at this stage. Having observed one of the most stringent and longest zero-COVID policies in the world, the uncertainties of geopolitical developments, and with opening of the bigger economies, Bhutan is not spared. Energy prices, inflation, and unemployment are soaring. We are losing our productive workforce to higher economies for better earning opportunities. Bhutan's attrition rate in all public offices is almost touching 9%, compared to less than 3% of the pre-pandemic rate. We are encountering enough stress signs in our system that if not acted now, Bhutan will lose all what we have attained until now. That is why my king entreated the nation to use the situation as a reset button and reposition ourselves to build back better with renewed purpose and standards. Therefore, our national transformation and reform initiatives of the entire public and private sector is underway back home as we speak here. In education, we're overhauling the entire system, changing curriculums to discontinue university courses that are not employable. We have introduced courses and skills that will be relevant to the emerging market, ICTization of the whole teaching learning system being our main approach. We have introduced mass scale national skilling program called DSP for thousands of youths that will be skilled for the emerging jobs. And the nation is prepared to roll out a full 1 year of skill-based national service for all Bhutanese who will be turning 18 from next year. In civil service, we are reorganizing the structure, instituting newer tools to achieve efficiency. Similarly, financial and judicial systems are being streamlined to shed off redundancy. On a similar note, our national digital identity system based on self-sovereign identity model is ready. Our NDI Act is being discussed in the parliament this week. Once passed, Bhutan will be the first country to roll out a national digital identity system backed by an act. A fully decentralized digital data management system will be in place in Bhutan. This is something that is very close to my king, an astute 21st century leader. Alongside, we're also gearing for a milestone event, the graduation from the LDC category of countries by this December. As much as we rejoice the transition, we are mindful of the vulnerabilities. Therefore, much of what we do and efforts that we put in today will determine our future. Our priorities are clear. Built on the principles of gross national happiness, we seek to grow and reshape ourselves as a sustainably developed country. Times and priorities have changed. That too, with a difficult sense of urgency. Accordingly, we seek new financing windows in a way that is more liberal in working, making ideas in countries flourish. I'm not just speaking for Bhutan, but for all the developing countries in the world that aspire to live a better life and play a substantial role as a member of the global community. During such times, we look towards friendly countries and multilateral development banks and individuals like you all. You are the group of people who think beyond avenues of profit. You embrace countries beyond that of your own. The MDBs seek higher purpose and meaning for the global community, and this gives me the confidence to pitch Bhutan as a destination. Bhutan has sacrificed enough to trade the sustainable GNH path. We have the values, trust, and integrity that ultimately matter in any relation. We seek investment not just in economic terms, but in our meaningful relation from here on. Ladies and gentlemen, here I would like to take a special mention of OPEC Fund team. I met Director Saima at Doha during the last LDC conference. Understanding our needs and priorities, you have come forward to collaborate with us. Thank you very much for your understanding. I was also informed that besides the financial assistance, OPEC Fund is willing to offer technical assistance as well as advisory and knowledge services through your Climate Finance and Energy Innovation Hub to help us meet our specific SDGs and our NDCs. Such expert services will be invaluable to us and our collaboration. Lastly, I would offer my sincere gratitude and best wishes for the fruitful discussions and deliberations over the day. May we attain an all-new level of resilience and equity that can weather all the storms heading our way. I offer you my sincere prayers. Thank you, and Tashidele.
Thank you also for reminding us that development is a verb. It's what you do deliberately, and a happy, healthy, productive nation is how you build a great dynamic nation state.